And after that, then they worry and wonder, why is Africa not developing? Africa is not developing because fools, middle, average leadership is what we have remaining. The best amongst us never end amongst us. The best amongst us are always taken away from us. And it is totally insensitive for the Western world to be sitting around mocking, laughing, insulting Africa's lack of competence, when actually the center and source of competence has been gagged, bribed, bought, siphoned, removed from the very land that needs them the most. So while I was walking in the routes in Ghana, looking at the slave routes, it occurred to me in a very impactful way that we can talk about colonialism in all its form, this parasitic behavior in all its manifestation. But in modernity, we also needed to start addressing the issue of brain drain, the issue of reallocation or relocation of the African brains to foreign lands, and what the impact of that drain is to our political and societal development. We in some of our countries, I'll be very specific, the countries where we come from, like Zimbabwe, God bless Zimbabwe, where, with all due respect, you will end up having a very huge parliament on the top side. But many of these parliamentarians and many of these ministers who are in government are military personnel. We thank them for the protection and the defense that they give us. But come to think about it, here you are as a country, you want economic development, you want job creation, you want to improve your roads, you want to improve power, electricity, you want to improve your health facilities, and then you go ahead and employ a military general to work on your GDP. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. You can't be buying guns and hope to eat fruits. You employ farmers to get fruits. And I've said this prior, without conflict or fear of contradiction, that the...
So look, Chinua Achebe, the renowned Nigerian author, was so right when he said the problem with Africa is simply and squarely one of leadership. That Africa, the entire Africa as a continent, we don't have any other problem. Our problem is simple, one of leadership. That we are electing fools to hold public offices, then we are expecting change. But look, sometimes I wonder, because at the end of the day, I think even we as the electorates, we have the problem. Because tell me why in Africa it is very rare for someone who is poor to hold public office. It is very rare. In fact, it is somehow impossible for someone who is poor to hold public office. Why? Because we are engineered to think that poverty should not lead you to public office. That's why we are electing leaders who, in one way or another, they are valuing themselves. They are not valuing the citizens of their countries. That is simple. So we don't need to blame so much. What we have to do is we have to rewire ourselves and think differently in relations to leadership within African continent. Permit me to say this. Even though we are also blaming ourselves, there are good things that are happening in Africa. Take a good example, what is happening in Burkina Faso. That is a true leader, a leader who is to be emulated. Take a good example, what is happening in Burkina Faso. Things are moving, okay? Take a geographical look. Go to Rwanda, post-genocide. Things are really moving. So even though we as Africans, we are punching below our weight, we also have to congratulate leaders who are spearheading African development. Leaders like Ibrahim Traore, leaders like Paul Kagame of Rwanda, leaders like Duma Boko of Burkina Faso, or rather Duma Boko of Botswana. Okay? So we have to emulate that kind of leadership. We have to elect people into office, people who love their countries. Okay? And that was the dream of our forefathers. That Africa has to be great. That Africa has to be united. How will we unite if our leaders are not leading us to the right direction? So it's incumbent of us, we the people who normally go to the ballot boxes to elect our leaders, to rethink what is leadership. Okay? What is leadership? We have presidents in Africa who have been in power since independence, more than 30 years ago. But go to those countries. Misery, lamentation, poverty. Yet the same leaders are being re-elected over and over again. That is the problem with Africa. Okay? And it's the same, this Joshua Maponga, the same Joshua Maponga is the same person who is spearheading the fact that the presidential term limit in Zimbabwe has to be extended. Can you even imagine that? The presidential term limit in Zimbabwe has to be extended. Why he is saying so is simple. Because he thinks that 5-year term is too little to foster development. That is according to Joshua Maponga. Something that I am against that. Because we can just take a good example. The former president of Tanzania, President John Pombe Magufuli. Magufuli was in power for 5 years, but it was noticeable that Tanzania was moving to another different orbit as far as development is concerned. So that means it is upon leadership. We don't even need presidents to be in power for 20 years. No. You can make change even for just 10 years. Change that can be recognized. Magufuli was in power, if I'm not wrong, for 7 years only. But see what happened in Tanzania. Massive transformation. Massive transformation. President Traore has been in power for, I think, 4 years now. But go to Burkina Faso and see that Burkina Faso is really fostering forward in terms of development. Building roads, hospitals. Everything is just mechanized. And they are doing it by themselves. So it is not upon presidential term limits to be extended. No. We just need people who love their countries, people who are true citizens, and people who want Africa to be great. So, ladies and gentlemen, Africa will be great. Africa must be great. This one will be done. It must be done. It will be done. And if it's not done, then we as Africans are done. Thank you for watching this video. See you next time. And if it's your first time here, kindly subscribe to the channel. And let's take this channel to maybe 5,000 subscribers. See you next time. Bye-bye.